Hey guys! So last week was very exciting with the launch of the 3080 cards, and besides the stock availability, it looks like a really good buy. Well, today we'll check out the titan of the 3000 series. Here we have the RTX3090 Gaming Pro OC from Palit. It is the top of the line card for the very few that can afford it. In this video, we'll check out where this card is doing well and where it is doing exceptionally well. We have already published an unboxing video. If you're interested, the link is in the description below. If you're new to this channel, please consider subscribing as we have a lot of content coming your way. Let's start with the specs. This card has 24 GB of the new GDDR6X VRAM and 10,496 Cuda cores. It is featuring the 3rd gen Tensor cores and 2nd gen RT cores. This Palit card uses NVIDIA reference PCB, which is surprisingly narrow, while still being 2.7 slots high. On the side we find two 8-pin power connections which are upside down. That's something new, but it actually makes a lot of sense for cables management as it makes it look a lot neater. Palit has included an anti-sag bracket in the box. It is just a clear plexiglass sheet. However, together with the rest of the lights, it looks really nice. Talk about LED lights. For all the LED lovers out there, there is an ARGB lighting which can be controlled using Thundermaster utility together with the fan speeds and overclocking. I personally like the armored look with the lights. It is a shame that you need a vertical bracket to properly enjoy it though. Right, before covering the results, let's talk about our test bench. We're using our Intel 10700K bench. This is because at higher clock speeds, we're getting less CPU bottlenecks as compared to AMD. By the way, a full review of Intel versus AMD on NVIDIA 3000 series is coming soon. Don't miss it. With that out of the way, we can now check out the benchmarks themselves. We'll be looking specifically at performance difference between the RTX3090 and 3080, specifically focusing on the 1440p and 4K resolutions, as 1080p is very much bottlenecked by the CPU and provides a lot of false results. Starting with a good old Shadow of a Tomb Raider, and we see about 9% improvement on the average scores on both 1440p and 4K. Furthermore, if we look at the 1 percentiles, we see 1440p is 5% lower and 4K is 6% higher. This is where the aforementioned CPU bottleneck is showing. Moving on to the Total War 3 Kingdoms, which has always been a very GPU taxing game. Here we see a 12% improvement on the 1440p at average scores and 10% improvement on the 1 percentiles. When it comes to 4K, the average score is 11% higher, but the 1 percentiles are up almost 40%. When investigating this further, we found that the CPU utilization on the RTX 3080 was only 18%, while on RTX 3090 it averaged over 25%, indicating that GPU was able to push much further. Next up, we have even tougher game, Horizon Zero Dawn, where RTX 3080 was only able to get into the 1440p gaming. Here we see 9% improvement on 1440p average and 10% on the 1 percentiles. When we look at the 4K, the difference is a whopping 33% on average score and an incredible 65% on the 1 percentiles. The results were very surprising, so we reran the tests to double check and confirm that this is actually correct. When investigating this further, we found that the VRAM usage on the RTX 3080 was 9.7 GB, essentially full, and RTX 3090 it was 11.6 GB. This indicates that the game was probably not just bottlenecked by the computational power, but also lacking the VRAM. Either way, with the RTX 3090 it is possible to play this game at 4K resolution with 70+ FPS, which is pretty awesome. Next, we jump into Metro Exodus, and here we yet again see similar improvements. At 1440p, we get a 12% bump on the average FPS and 7% on the 1 percentiles. When looking at the 4K, it is 12% on the average FPS and 10% on the 1 percentiles. When enabling ray tracing, we see a 13 to 14% improvement on the averages and the 14 to 15% improvement on the 1 percentiles. But unfortunately, these are still unplayable frame rates. Turning on DLSS provides us a 13% improvement on the 1440p average FPS and a 6% improvement on the 1 percentiles. While in 4K, we see a 13% improvement on average FPS and a 12% on the 1 percentiles. On this game, we get a more solid 1440p experience with the ray tracing while DLSS is enabled. If we had another 15% performance improvement, we would be able to get into the 4K territory. we're that close. To quickly sum up gaming, we have about 9 to 14% improvement in most scenarios, and then a few very large improvements in selected titles, which is pretty good, and in most cases this card solidifies 4K gameplay. We did stumble into some problems with Ghost Recon Breakpoints, where this card was performing worse than RTX 3080. In fact, at 4K it was performing almost at 2080 Super level. This is most likely due to the driver issues, so results have been classed as invalid. We'll do a follow-up on that in the future. Just thought it's best to share, as there may be other titles that have similar issues upon launch, while Nvidia is optimizing things with the developers. When having a closer look at the temperatures, we found that this card is a little bit hotter than the 3080, but is rather expected as it has more horsepower. Here are the averages from our benchmarking. In Shadow of a Tomb Raider it was 67 degrees, in Total War 3 Kingdoms it was 68 degrees, in Horizon Zero Dawn it was 64 degrees, in Metro Exodus it was 65 degrees. These are all just averages, and I don't think the fans ever went up past 50% anyway. Talking about fans, we have carried out tests to see the relative loudness in comparison to the other two cards. This test is done in TestBench, so depending on your case, the final results will be different for everybody, but this should provide you with a good oversight on the amount of noise generated. Just a note, our room noise floor was 36.3 decibels. In testing, while at 60% fan speed, RTX 3090 hits 49 decibels, which is actually the loudest out of the three. When we pushed it to 80%, it hit 55.6 decibels, and at full blast it was 63.6. So you can see that the card is not exactly quiet when you ramp it up. However, during the whole time of reviewing and benchmarking it, there were only a handful of times the card had to ramp up to an audible level, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. Now heading over to the productivity benchmarks, and here we start with the Blender BMW render, where we see an 18% improvement over the RTX 3080. In the longer classroom test, the difference in render time is 12% from the RTX 3080, which is still a nice little bump. Next, we ran DaVinci Resolve benchmark by Puget Systems to see how much additional computational power and VRAM helps out, and it is about 11% improvement on the overall score, with the highest improvement being the temporal noise reduction at 18%. The thing to consider though, VRAM capacity opens up a whole different workflow, and many creative programs will take as much as you can give it to speed things up, so 24 GB is going to work like magic here. With all the benchmarks out of the way, we were planning to make a price to performance section, but with what we have seen with 3080 launch, there may be availability issues and prices will shift back and forth for the next few months. Plus, this card is not exactly aimed for the budget buyers, but rather for the few who can afford it. We would simply recommend checking out the performance numbers we've covered today and also compare those against other reviewers before you make your final decision. To conclude, what did we really think about this card? Well, it is a titan alright. It does have 20% more Cuda, Tensor and RT cores over the RTX 3080, and in some cases even has the performance to match. While it is not linear scaling, it is still about 10% faster than RTX 3080 in most applications, and the added 24 GB of VRAM is simply amazing. Now we need game developers to catch up and really optimize for it, so the VRAM is not just sitting there idle. If you're the kind of person who can easily afford it, I have a feeling you're already buying it, maybe even two of them. To everybody else, I would say consider if you actually need this kind of performance, or if RTX 3080 is good enough. If you want to check out any of the items we've tested today, we'll leave the links in the description below. I hope this was useful. Don't forget to smash the thumbs up and subscribe for more. We'll see you guys in the next one.